It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Hey, Jake from YouTube. We're going to answer your question next. Do the guys prefer mutual funds or ETFs? Example, VT-SAX versus VTI. They are treated identically, I believe, but I wasn't sure if they had a preference. And even what are the differences between those two things for people listening?
So here's the cool thing. I say both.
Okay.
Because
I like
but let me give you context, because that's why it gets complicated. Like I said, as you get older and more successful, your financial life gets complex. Yep. You don't even have to go look for it. I do like mutual funds. I think a lot of people, have thrown out mutual funds because they go, man, ETFs, they're sexy.
So much more efficient.
You can trade them intraday. And there are some benefits from a tax planning standpoint. But here's something that I don't love about a lot of the ETFs. Now, look, people are going to troll me. They're going to say, yes, you can. But I'm going to tell you the easiest path if you're setting up a monthly dollar cost averaging is still going to be a mutual fund. It's going to be an index mutual fund. I love doing that because I told you guys, I'm a freak. I don't dollar cost average monthly. I'm dollar cost averaging weekly. So it's hard to do that with my current structure with an ETF, but I can easily do that with a mutual fund. So I love that. But this is a unique year. 2022 has had a lot of volatility. I'm not immune from the markets fluctuating, just like all of our clients, our listeners, and everybody else. And I practice what we preach in the fact that I've harvested losses. So I've sold some of those mutual funds at losses. And guess what? When I roll it into something, sometimes one of the better choices out there are some of these ETFs that are sitting out there. So that's why it's not uncommon for financial mutants who are taking advantage of all the strategies we share to end up with both mutual funds and ETFs. Now, one last thing, and then I'll let Bo kind of put a cherry and some whipped cream on this, is that I do like at year end, one of the things you worry about now, the good news is index funds are much more tax efficient than active managed funds, but you still worry about at year end, mutual funds specifically generate a lot of income, or they have the potential to generate year-end distributions. ETFs are much more efficient on that. So that's why I always say when anybody comes into money and they're investing at year-end, the timing of within the year also makes sense. So if you're investing in the fourth quarter, you might want to lean more towards the ETFs than you do to the mutual funds, just because of those pent-up or built-up distributions that are going to be coming in the fourth quarter. All that, by the way, when you get to the point that you're thinking about these things, this once again is probably graduating to the next level of considering the abundance cycle and hiring an advisor to help you navigate those things.
Yeah, so I'm going to step back for a moment, right? Both mutual funds and ETFs are just baskets of holdings, right? So when you think about the equity side, a mutual fund is just a fund that buys a bunch of stocks to try to accomplish some goal. Maybe
or bonds or real estate.
Yeah, sure. On the equity side specifically, though, we're talking about like stocks, right? So go buy S&P 500, it buys the 500 biggest companies. An ETF is the same thing, right? They basically kind of do the same type of thing. Mutual funds only trade at the end of the day, one time a day. They trade at the net asset value of all their underlying holdings. ETFs, like you say, trade intraday, right? Well, really, when you're building a portfolio, you can kind of construct it almost identically using one or the other. So the question becomes, when does each or the other make sense? One really interesting thing to look at now, Brian, you had mentioned mutual funds often, when the mutual fund manager, when the mutual fund company is buying and selling throughout the course of the year, they accumulate gains, right? They sell something, buy something else, sell something, buy something else. At the end of the year, they distribute those gains out to you, the shareholder. So like Brian said, if you happen to buy it right before they distribute capital gains, you're going to get hit with a tax bill when you didn't get to take that ride. So you want to be mindful of that. It actually also cuts the other way. When you come through a period where there are a lot of losses embedded inside of a mutual fund, you might see an ETF and a mutual fund, but this mutual fund has a 20% embedded loss because that manager's been selling and clipping.
Bravo.
That means you can go buy that and actually make 20% of that fund before they'll start distributing out gains. So it's a really unique tax efficient thing, specifically during downturns, to think about when you're trying to analyze the difference in each of them.
Yeah, and I love that because that's like fish food for financial mutants, or brain food. Maybe I don't know why I said fish food, but brain food for financial mutants. But I was just going to close it out with, Look, a lot of this comes down to also just the straight up cost, and the cost that you can control and you can look at is the internal expenses.
Yep.
So go look at the internal expenses of the ETF. Look at the internal expenses of the mutual funds. If you're doing index funds, like we always recommend at the big providers, that's Fidelity, Charles Schwab, Vanguard, they're all going to be really cost effective and good. Look at the trading costs because there are some differences. We've got the trend now where ETFs are getting free in a lot of cases if you have enough money.
But a lot of mutual funds are too.
Yeah, but sometimes there's trading costs with placing the trades. Pay attention to that. And then the last thing, and we mentioned this, was the tax efficiency. And that's why I love that Bo put that financial mutant, sweetener or flavoring on there that showed you that it varies based upon what's going on in the economy, whether it's a plus or a minus on that decision-making process. Well done.
So, Ruby, we spent a few more minutes than necessary saying we like them both. Like, which one's better? It's like, which one of your kids do you love the most?
People always say, you don't answer the question. I'm like, how can we answer the question when everybody is different? We make different incomes. We have different goals. We have different structures of our accounts. This is why I always say financial advisors are going to have jobs, just because I try to give you all the variables that we use in the decision making, but there is a lot that goes into each decision. Yep. People will ask us, hey, how long does it take you to do this rebalance? And you'll be like, it takes probably 10 minutes, but 20 years of experience. And you're like, whoa, wait, it only takes you 10 minutes to do it. Yeah, but 20 years of experience goes into all these variables. Don't underestimate that value of driving the car for a long time to understand the ins and outs of all these different variables.